Hello and welcome back to RPG PhD. I'm Dr. Ben. Most prep advice you'll find tells you to read your module, highlight the important bits, maybe just jot down some notes, and that works up to a point. But what I want to give you today is a deeper tool, a way of reading adventure modules that helps you understand what they're actually doing structurally and dramatically moment to moment. We're talking about theatrical beat mapping. It's a technique borrowed from script analysis, the kind of close reading work that directors and dramaturgs do when they're breaking down a play or a screenplay before production. By the end of this video, you'll have a method for stripping any module down to its dramatic skeleton, identifying exactly where the momentum lives, where it stalls, and what you can do about it. So, let's get into it. So let's start with the foundational question. What actually is a beat? In theater and screenwriting, a beat is the smallest unit of dramatic action. Robert McKee, in his screenwriting manual Story, defines it as an exchange of behavior in action and reaction. The moment of value shifts between the people in a scene. The concept actually goes back further than screenwriting. It traces to Stanislavski's actor training in the early 20th century, where small units of intention were used to break a scene into manageable dramatic tasks. There's even a theory that the English word beat in this context is a mistranslation of the Russian word bit, a small piece introduced when his system was taught in America. Whether that's true or not, the underlying idea is the same. Find the smallest unit where something changes and work from there. Here's a simple way to think about it. Two characters are talking. One of them is pushing for something. The other is resisting. That's a beat. Then one of them reveals a piece of information that changes the dynamic entirely. Now the power has shifted. That's a new beat. In tabletop role-playing games, a beat ends when player agency meaningfully expands or contracts. That's your signal. When players suddenly have more options than they did a moment ago, new information, a door that opened, an enemy that backed down, that's a beat shift. When their options suddenly narrow, a trap springs, an NPC turns hostile, the clock runs out, that's also a beat shift. The direction of the shift matters less than the fact that it happened. Let me make this concrete. Take the classic tavern hook. Game Master describes a cloaked figure in the corner. Players notice him. That's the opening beat, the world presenting something worth engaging. Players approach. The figure eyes them cautiously and doesn't speak first. That's a beat shift. Now the players hold the conversational leverage. They have to make a move. One of them asks who he is. He says he knows what they did last winter, and suddenly he has the power again. Beat shift. He slides a sealed letter across the table. Decision point. Do they take it? That last moment, the letter on the table, that's what we'd call a decision beat. We'll get into the full taxonomy in a bit, but notice what just happened. In a scene that might take 3 minutes at the table, we moved through at least 4 distinct beats. Each one shifted who had leverage. Each one required the players to respond to a new dramatic reality. That's the pulse of a well-structured scene, and beat mapping is the process of making that pulse visible so you can see it before you run a module. So if beats are the pulse of a well-structured scene, what happens when a game master can't find that pulse? What does a module look like when you haven't mapped it? Here's the core issue. Some published adventure modules are written as descriptions. They tell you what a room looks like, what an NPC wants, what treasure is available, what happens if the players do the obvious thing. That's all, of course, useful information. Description and structure are doing 2 different jobs, though. Knowing that the throne room has vaulted ceilings and a suspicious vizier tells you what the space looks like and who's in it. The question of when the power shifts during the scene that happens there, that lives somewhere else entirely. The spatial and character details are present. The dramatic architecture is buried underneath them. And when game masters run from description alone without a sense of where the beats are, a few things can go wrong. The first is pacing collapse. Without some beat awareness, scenes might have no internal rhythm. They either drag because the game master is waiting for players to somehow find the momentum on their own, or they rush because the game master feels the scene is going flat and skips ahead before it's actually resolved. Another problem is what I call shapeless scenes. Players leave the interaction and can't quite articulate what happened or why it mattered. Maybe something occurred, Maybe some information was exchanged, but it didn't land. That's almost always a sign that the scene had no clear decision beat, no moment where players were genuinely forced to commit to something with consequences on both sides of the choice. Keith Johnstone's book Impro spends a lot of time analyzing what he called status transactions, the constant small negotiations of dominance and submission that happen between people in any interaction. His argument was that every exchange has a status dimension, and that drama lives in the moment of status between people. That's exactly what we're talking about when we talk about who holds leverage in a scene. Johnstone was writing about actors, but he was describing something true about every human interaction, including the ones happening at your table. Alright, so here's where we get practical. The beat mapping method has 4 steps, and I want to walk through each one in enough detail that you can actually sit down with a module tonight and do this. Step 1. Read for events rather than flavor. Your first pass through any scene or encounter is purely forensic. Set the atmosphere and the lore aside. You have one question to ask about every sentence. Does something change here? If the answer is yes, somebody learns something, somebody gains or loses an advantage, a new option opens up or closes off, you mark it. If the answer is no, if it's describing the color of the walls or the smell of the dungeon or the backstory of the villain, you let it go for now. Flavor has its place, but it doesn't belong in your beat map. The practical tool for this pass is what I call the so what test, borrowed from David Ball's Backwards and Forwards. Read a sentence or a paragraph and ask, so what? What does this change about the situation? The test has 2 outcomes. If you can answer it with a consequence, it goes in the map. The players now know the Baron is the murderer. The entire political situation just changed. That's an answer. If the best you can produce is a shrug, that's probably just flavor. The room is big, the walls are old, the torch flickers. Leave it where it is and keep moving. This is your raw event list. That's your working material. Step 2, identify the narrative power holders. Once you have your event list, go back through it and ask a different question for each event. Who is in control right now? This is Johnstone's status framework from Impro applied to structure rather than performance. Instead of asking how an actor should play a moment, we're asking what the text is doing with power at each point in the sequence. Specifically, we're looking at 3 axes of control. Who holds the information, who knows something the other party doesn't, and who holds the action, who can make a meaningful move versus who is reacting. And who holds the stakes, who has more to lose, and therefore more leverage over the situation. Mark each event according to who controls the majority of those 3 axes. I use a simple notation: Game Master held, player held, contested, or unresolved. Game Master held means the table is reacting to the fiction. Player held means the players are genuinely driving. Contested means it's live and dynamic, which is usually where your best scenes happen. And unresolved means the scene ended before power settled anywhere. Sometimes intentional, sometimes a structural problem. What you're building here is what I call the power grid for the scene. Run through it and you'll immediately see patterns. A long stretch of Game Master held beats with no contested moments tells you the scene is a delivery mechanism. The players are an audience rather than participants. A long stretch of unresolved beats usually means the scene lacks a spine. There's no clear dramatic question driving it forward. Step 3. Label the beat type. Now you give each beat a name. I usually work with 5 beat types, and they cover the overwhelming majority of what happens in published adventure content. McKee and other script analysts use overlapping terminology, but I've adapted the taxonomy specifically for tabletop. The underlying logic is the same. The labels are calibrated for what game masters actually encounter in module text. A revelation beat is when information shifts the frame. The players learn something that changes how they understand the situation. Classic examples: the ally is compromised, the map is wrong, the monster has a weakness that nobody knew about. A confrontation beat is when competing intentions surface openly. 2 or more parties want incompatible things, and that tension becomes explicit. This is the engine of most social and combat encounters. A decision beat is when players are forced to commit to something with real consequences on both sides. A genuine fork where what they choose will matter, and they know it going in. A consequence beat is when the world responds to something the players already did. It's how players feel that their actions have weight. A threshold beat is a point of no return, a moment of structural escalation where the nature of the scene or adventure itself shifts. The dungeon collapses behind them. The political situation goes public. The villain becomes aware of the player's involvement. After a threshold beat, the game is different in some meaningful way. What we need to notice is which ones are missing. A scene with no decision beat is a scene players are just watching. A scene with no consequence beat tells players their prior choices were decorative. Labeling the types makes the gaps visible. Step 4. Annotate for momentum. So your last step, take your labeled beat map and read it as an arc. What is the emotional trajectory of this scene and of this section of the module as a whole? Mark anywhere the arc plateaus, which means 2 or more consecutive scenes of the same beat type, or scenes where the power grid reads the same as the one before it with no meaningful shift. Plateaus are your pacing danger zones. Then identify what I call the structural spine of the scene, the 3 to 5 beats that the entire scene depends on. Once you know what the spine is, you know what you can afford to fumble, and you know what you have the most flexibility to improvise around. That's your beat map. 4 steps, 1 pass through the text, and you now understand the dramatic architecture of your scene, and you can do this at the adventure level as well. Alright, so let's actually do this. Theory can only take you so far. At some point you have to put the method on a real piece of text and see what comes out. Here's the Goblin Ambush from Lost Mine of Phandelver, exactly as written. I'm going to read it to you straight. Here's the setup. You've been on the Tribord Trail for about a day and a half. As you come around a bend, you spot 2 dead horses sprawled about 50 feet ahead of you, blocking the path. Each has several black-feathered arrows sticking out of it. The woods press close to the trail here, with a steep embankment and dense thickets on either side. Then, once the players move closer, the saddlebags have been looted. Nearby lies an empty leather map case. And then the module notes, 4 goblins are hiding in the woods, 2 on each side of the road. They wait until someone approaches the bodies, and then they attack. That's the complete encounter setup. 3 short paragraphs. If you've run this or played through it, you've probably seen it handled in a couple of different ways. Either the Game Master reads the box text, players poke around for 30 seconds or so, and then initiative gets called. Or the Game Master reads the box text, players ask a few questions, get a couple of skill check results, and then initiative gets called. Either way, the investigation phase might feel slightly hollow depending on how it's run, and the beat map will show us exactly why. So the first pass is the so what sweep. 2 dead horses blocking the path, so what? The players cannot simply continue forward. Forward movement, the most basic form of player agency in this case, has been physically interrupted. The trail is blocked. That goes in the beat map. Black feathered arrows in each horse, so what? This was deliberate. Something with ranged capability killed these animals on purpose. Someone organized this. That goes in the map. Woods pressing close, steep embankment, dense thickets on either side. So what? The players are in a natural kill zone. Their tactical options are already constrained before they know they're in danger. That goes in the map. And it's doing quiet but serious structural work we'll come back to. The saddlebags have been looted. So what? Someone was here after the attack. This wasn't just violence, it was purposeful. Something was taken. That goes in the map. An empty leather map case. So what? Whatever was in that case mattered enough to take. If your players are on the Meet Me in Fandalen hook, they know that Grundren had a map. This detail lands like a gut punch. The thing they were hired to protect is already gone. That goes in the map. 4 goblins waiting in the woods. So what? The players are already being watched. Every moment of investigation is happening under hostile surveillance. The players don't know this, the Game Master obviously does. That asymmetry goes in the map. The trail description, the half day of travel, the specific species of arrow, atmosphere. Useful for delivery, but not for beats. Second pass, power grid. When the box text lands and the players first see the horses, power is contested, leaning Game Master. The players have freedom of movement. They can approach, hold back, scan the tree line, but the information axis is entirely Game Master held. They don't know what this means yet. When they move closer and find the looted saddlebags and the empty map case, something interesting happens. The players are actively investigating, asking questions, rolling checks. On the surface, this looks player-held. They're the detectives. The scene is the evidence. But look at the action axis. The goblins are already in position. The ambush is already set. The player's apparent agency during the investigation phase is happening inside a trap that has already closed around them. The action axis is Game Master held even while the players feel like they're driving. This is a contested beat with a hidden asymmetry baked directly into the encounter design. When the goblins attack, the moment someone gets close enough to the bodies, the power grid flips completely to Game Master held across all three axes simultaneously. Information: the players still don't know how many goblins there are, what they want, or whether more are coming. Action: the players are reacting to an attack, not initiating one. Stakes: entirely in the Game Master's hands. The scene has gone from contested to Game Master held in a single trigger moment. The third pass is beat labeling. The discovery of the horses is a revelation beat. The world is presenting evidence that something happened here, and the physical details, the arrows, the blocked path, the embankment closing in on both sides, are shifting the player's understanding of their situation with each new piece. The closer investigation, the saddlebags, the map case, is a second revelation beat. The frame shifts again. What looked like an ambush now looks like a targeted theft. The mission has changed shape. The goblin attack is a confrontation beat. Competing intentions surface. The goblins want to eliminate witnesses and protect their position. The players want to survive and recover what was taken. And those two things are now in open conflict. So here's what the map makes visible. Between that second revelation beat and the confrontation beat, there is no decision beat. The module's trigger is clean and logical. Players approach the bodies, goblins attack. But that trigger skips the dramatic step where the players get to act on what they've learned. The investigation generates real, meaningful information. The looted saddlebags, the empty map case, the tight terrain. And then the encounter moves past the players before they can do anything with it. That information never factors into a choice that they make. It just sits there until initiative is called. The investigation phase has a slightly hollow quality. Players roll perception and survival, maybe get a strong read on the scene, and then the goblins attack anyway, on their own timing, on their own terms. The skill checks don't really change anything. The players were detectives in a scene that wasn't actually waiting for them to detect anything. So if you wanted to, for example, add a decision beat, then you hold the trigger slightly. Before the attack fires, give the players a beat of unease, a sound in the thicket, a flash of movement at the edge of the embankment, the birds going quiet, something that tips them off without giving anything away. Now they have a choice. They can push forward, pull back, ready for a fight, call out into the trees. Whatever they choose, they are making a genuine decision under partial information and real pressure. That's a decision beat. And now when the goblins attack, the confrontation is something the players walked into with their eyes at least half open, rather than something that simply happened to them. So the beat sequence would be revelation, revelation, decision, confrontation. Each beat earns the next one. The investigation earns the decision shapes how the players enter the confrontation. They arrive at combat having already committed to something, which means they're invested in what happens before a single attack roll is made. So that's one small structural addition and one example. That's what the map shows you. Also, if you would like another full example of beat mapping, then join us over on Discord. I will post up a written example from Death House over there so you can see another example. So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I've mapped my module, I've found the gaps, now what? Beat mapping is a diagnostic tool. Its job is to show you what's happening structurally so you can make informed decisions about what to do with that information. It's not a mandate to rebuild the adventure from scratch, and honestly, the game masters who get the most out of this method are usually the ones who learn to distinguish between two very different problems. beats that are missing, and beats that are buried. A missing beat is a genuine structural gap, like the decision beat we identified in the Phandelver encounter. That could be considered missing. The module text doesn't set it up, doesn't gesture toward it, doesn't give you the raw materials to improvise it organically. If you want it there, you have to add it deliberately. A buried beat is something else entirely. It's a beat that exists in the module. The material is there, but it's submerged under description or tucked into a sidebar or phrased as an optional detail that's easy to skim past. They need to be surfaced. Your job as the game master is to bring them forward into the scene where they can actually do their work. Linda Sager, in Making a Good Script Great, makes a similar distinction when she talks about scenes that need to be rewritten versus scenes that simply need their subtext brought to the surface. Her framing is slightly different. She's working with screenplays in development, but the diagnostic logic is identical. Before you touch anything, you need to know which problem you actually have. There are two specific situations where adding beats is clearly the right call. The first is a plateau. If your momentum annotation shows 2 or more consecutive scenes with the same beat type and the same power grid reading, you may have rhythm fatigue building. 3 revelation beats in a row is one of the most common pacing problems in published dungeon crawls. Room after room after room of the players finding things out with no decision or consequent beats in between to give that information somewhere to go. The fix is usually adding a single decision beat in the middle of the plateau sequence, something that forces players to act on what they've learned before they learn anything else. The second situation is a missing consequence beat following a major player decision. If your players made a significant choice 2 scenes ago and the module hasn't acknowledged it yet, that silence might be eroding their investment. They need to feel the world respond. A consequence beat doesn't have to be dramatic or a catastrophe or even a reward. It just has to be legible. An NPC who heard about what they did, a door that's now locked because of a choice they made, a rumor that's spread, something that confirms their actions have weight in this fictional world. Now let's talk about module designers. Everything we've covered so far has been aimed at the game master sitting down with someone else's adventure. But a lot of you watching this are also designers, writing your own modules, your own one-shots, your own published adventures. And if that's you, I want to flip the framework around, because beat mapping can be a tool for writing adventures. One problem in adventure design is that some designers think in locations and events, room by room, encounter by encounter, scene by scene. And that's a reasonable way to organize content. Players do move through space. Things do happen in sequence. But locations and events are the surface layer. What's underneath them, holding them together, is the beat structure. And if you design from the surface down, you can end up with a beautifully described adventure that has no dramatic pulse. If you design from the beat structure up, the descriptions and events have somewhere to be. So here's what that looks like in practice. Start with your spine rather than your map. First, identify your structural spine, the 3 to 5 beats that each scene depends on, and the beats that the entire adventure depends on. What are the moments of irreversible change? Where does the world shift on its axis? A threshold beat that marks the point of no return. A revelation beat that reframes everything the players thought they understood. A decision beat where the players have to commit to something that costs them something real. If you can name those before you write anything else, every room and encounter you design has a job. It either builds toward one of those spine beats or follows from one. If it does neither, you should ask whether it belongs in the adventure at all. Design for power movement, not just power distribution. A common design instinct is to balance information. Give players clues spread across multiple locations. Make sure no single room has too much. That's good instinct. But it's thinking about information as inventory rather than as dramatic currency. The question to ask isn't just who has the information, it's when the players get it and what it changes when they do. A revelation beat only works if the revelation actually shifts the power grid. If the players learn something that confirms what they already suspected without materially changing their options, that's flavor dressed as a beat. Design your revelation beats around reversals, information that makes the players rethink something they thought was settled. Build decision beats with real architecture on both sides. This is where a lot of published adventures quietly fail. A decision point gets written into the module. Do you go left or right? Do you trust the NPC or not? But only one side of the choice has been developed. The other side is thin, or loops back to the same outcome, or is clearly the wrong answer in a way that makes the choice feel decorative. A decision beat earns its structural role when both sides of the choice lead somewhere genuinely different, and when the players can feel the weight on both sides before they commit. That weight comes from what you've built in the scenes before it. The decision beat is the payoff of the beats that preceded it. If the preceding beats haven't made the players care about the stakes, the decision won't land. Place your consequence beats deliberately. Some designers write consequence beats reactively. If the players do this, then that happens, which is a good way of doing things. But it treats consequence as a response system rather than a structural element. Think about where in the adventure's arc the players most need to feel that their choices have accumulated weight. Usually this is the middle third, when early decisions start to have visible downstream effects. And again near the climax, when everything the players have done comes back to matter. If you map your consequence beats intentionally, rather than just writing conditional triggers, you'll find that some of your early decision beats aren't actually being honored by anything downstream. And you can fix that before anyone sits down to play. Write your threshold beats last, then build backward. A threshold beat is a point of no return, and sometimes it can be the hardest beat type to write well because it needs to feel inevitable in retrospect, even though it should feel like a genuine escalation in the moment. The way to get there is to write the threshold beat first, decide exactly what changes and why it can't be undone, and then work backward through the preceding scenes to make sure each one is building toward that inevitability without telegraphing it. The players should reach the threshold beat and feel simultaneously that they couldn't have seen this coming and that of course it was always going to come to this. That dual feeling is a mark of a well-constructed threshold. It doesn't happen by accident. Use the beat taxonomy as a diagnostic during revision. Once you have a draft, map it the same way a game master would. Run the so what test on your own prose. Build the power grid for each scene. Label the beat types. What you're looking for in your own work is the same thing a game master would look for in prep. Plateaus, missing beat types, decision beats with no architecture on one side, consequence beats that never arrive. The difference, of course, is that you can fix these things in the text before anyone runs it. A game master doing beat mapping is adapting someone else's work. A designer doing beat mapping is finishing their own. One specific thing to watch for, long stretches of Game Master held beats in your power grid. This is the signature of an adventure that's more interested in its own world than in its players. If your power grid shows scene after scene of the players receiving information, witnessing events, and reacting to NPC actions, the adventure is performing for the players rather than with them. Find those stretches and ask what decision or confrontation beat could be inserted to hand some of that power back. The players don't need to be in control of everything. They need to feel that their engagement with the fiction is generative, that something different happens because they were there. Alright, so now let's look at a quick step-by-step one-page guide. This is the practical version of everything covered so far, so keep this next to your module during prep. Step 1. Strip the text. Read through the scene and apply the so what test to every sentence or paragraph. Mark everything that changes the situation. Set everything else aside. What remains is your event list. Step 2. Build the power grid. Go through your event list and mark who controls each event. Use 4 labels: Game Master held, Player held, Contested, Unresolved. Track all 3 axes, information, action, and stakes. Look for long stretches of the same label. Those are your first warning signs. Step 3. Label the beat types. Assign each event a beat type: revelation, confrontation, decision, consequence, or threshold. If a beat type is absent from the sequence entirely, note it. If the same beat type appears 3 or more times in a row, flag it. Step 4. Annotate for momentum. Read the labeled sequence as an arc. Mark anywhere it plateaus. Identify the structural spine, the 2 or 3 beats the scene absolutely depends on. Everything else exists to build toward or follow from those moments. Step 5. Diagnose and intervene if you want. Ask 2 questions. First, are any beats missing that should be there? Second, are any beats present but buried under description? Missing beats get added, buried beats get surfaced. If the power grid shows a long stretch of Game Master held with no contested moments, find where player agency can be restored. So let's bring this home with something you can actually use this week. The goal is a reference you can glance at during live play. For major set pieces, a climactic confrontation, a high-stakes social encounter, a dungeon's final sequence, do the full 4-step analysis. For lighter scenes, a quick mental pass through the so what test and a rough power grid read is probably enough. You're just building a habit of structural thinking. Beat mapping is a great skill to have as a game master because it's showing you what your prep actually needs. If you found this video useful, do give it a like, share, and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.